Today, we mostly want to talk about relationship-based fundraising, and we'll talk about why this is important. But this is a concept that kind of moves the overarching concept of transactions are on one side, and this is how most charities do fundraises. Like you ask for a gift, you get an amount of money, and then you move on, you go to the next one. There's a better way, and there's nuance to being able to build that up and do it correctly. So we're going to kind of talk through the how, the why, and the things that you can immediately implement as you're kind of starting into the new year. If you're going to have a New Year's fundraising resolution, it's to create these meaningful partnerships and connections so that when you have the effort of going through of finding someone who also is passionate about the thing that you work on in your nonprofit, that you don't have to keep finding people. Once you find them, they hopefully will stay a donor for their lifetime. They'll give you something every year. They give you a little bit more if you have some sort of a campaign or a big effort, and then hopefully put you in their estate as well. But that takes a lot of work. So we're going to talk about what are the things we can actually do and implement in our day-to-day to make that happen. Let's go ahead and go to that next slide, Trish. Okay. So these are the things we're going to cover today. So if we have not covered these things today, we have not done our job, but I'm assuming that we're going to get through all of these. And if you have questions, you can leave them in the chat. I'll kind of keep an eye on the chat as we go. So feel free to ask questions in real time. And then we will have additional time for questions at the end. If it's specific to your organization, awesome. We can answer that. If it's more general, also great. So the first thing is the difference between relationship-based fundraising, which is the good kind, that's the one we want, and transactional fundraising. The second is the application of donor-centered activities as opposed to organizational-centered activities. Very easy to get caught in that trap. Number three are what are the things we actually track? What are the metrics that we need to measure? It's the saying that what gets measured gets managed. We don't have to go crazy with tracking all these KPIs, but what are some of the key indicators that we can just put on a really simple spreadsheet and check back in twice a month or once a month to make sure that we're on track towards relationship and away from transactional fundraising? What are the pitfalls, the mistakes that we have made or we've seen clients make, and we help correct all the time with the relationship-based approach? And then finally, just some more global sector trends overall that support relational practice. So we can learn a lot from looking at nonprofit data nationally. We do, I think, a pretty great job of tracking how philanthropy trends nationally. Our team pays attention to that so that you don't have to, and we distill that information for you. So we're going to close with some bigger picture stuff that will help you out in that area. So with that, let's jump into the first piece, and what is relationship-based fundraising? So we want to think about this as forming long-term partnerships. So I'm not looking for someone to donate to my charity. I'm looking for someone whose values and excitement for the work aligns with our organizations. So finding someone who is passionate about kids or animals or veterans or whatever your charity supports, healthcare, all the different things that we have, all the different clients that we work with, to find people who are also passionate about that thing and then connect them to it so that they have a relationship not necessarily with us or with our board or with our leadership, but with the mission itself. Like we as the staff and volunteers and people who are working for the charity, our job is to facilitate the relationship of donors and their passion. And the best way to do that is to find people who are naturally going to resonate with the things that we're doing. So we're looking to build these long-term partnerships, not just get money, because it actually ends up making more revenue, especially for the amount of time you put in the first place. This should go without saying, but this involves a lot of authentic engagement and relationship building. So this isn't being happy and smiley and fake all the time. It's too hard. You can't fake it in the long term. You can't fake friendship. You can't fake caring. You can't fake human connection past a certain point. Maybe in a transactional fundraising, you can talk about pull some heartstrings and get some easy cash. But what we're talking about today, hopefully, is forming meaningful relationships with people and then just presenting them with opportunities to do good. It feels less like asking for money, and you feel less shy about like, oh, I'm going to make them mad. I'm going to ask them for this. I keep asking them for stuff every single year. If you have that good personal connection with them and you just present them with, hey, here's the stuff that we're doing. Here are the cool things that our organization is working on right now. We're so excited about these things. Which of these do you feel like you'd want to support, or what are some of the stuff that you'd like to get involved with? Oftentimes the donor will come and thank you, and you're like, well, I'm not the one giving the money. It's like, well, right, but they're so excited that with their resources they can connect with something meaningful. People don't give away money because they have too much. It's because they want to make connection with other humans or with a cause, and that authentic connection where you're going to make these actual relationships, which again takes time and interaction. that reflects the things that they want. So we want to kind of, well, again, we'll talk about this, but move from what does the organization need, but instead ask, what does the donor need or what does the donor want? And can I answer that question with a project or a gift or something that we can do on our end? The art of partnership, obviously, is that everybody wins. It's not necessarily the case that, it's like sales. Like I'm going to try to get as many as possible, and I'm going to trick them into doing this. And it's like maybe, hopefully, ethical companies don't have that approach to sales. But it is in an ideal world, they get as much out of this relationship as we do. So if you come to the meeting, the donor meeting, the proposal, the whatever you're building for your prospects with asking the question, can they get equal out of this transaction or this relationship or this connection that we do? And what are the things that would be meaningful to them that would equal the weight of the money that they're giving? And we can try to balance those things. That is what true partnership is. And that's what we want to aim for. Not, well, I think they normally give $25,000 to the botanical gardens, so we're just going to ask them for that because that's the amount that they give to organizations. It's like, well, okay, what did they get when they gave the 25,000? Like, what did they hope happened when they gave the 25? If they were to give 25 to us, what do we hope happened? What outcomes can we present to them? What outcomes are important to them, and can we build that partnership through that? It's not transactional, which is, of course, the like you send out an appeal, you get a gift, you send a tax receipt. We've done it, and we do have some of that. And there's obviously capture mechanisms like crowdfunding, social media, sending out a physical mail appeal. All these things we still use these techniques because they do have some merit. They work as tools in the fundraiser tool belt, but they aren't necessarily the relationship builders that we. So maybe it's fine to kind of capture the initial people or capture an initial gift this way, but it is very transactional. It feels like a sale. It feels like I purchased an online something, as opposed to if I find a human that I can connect to who's a part of that organization, or I get to see the work up close, or I get some level of back and forth. I'm just going to give without being asked. I'm going to ask where I can be helpful. I'm going to volunteer. People who volunteer for a charity, I think, are like 60 or 70% more likely to give every single year. So being able to get people kind of into the fold of what you're doing at some level makes a huge difference. This is, of course, ongoing conversation and cultivation, which more often than not requires you to leave the comfort of your office and go out into the community and talk to people. And it's, again, centered on mutual value. What can I offer? Even if it's just information or an experience or an opportunity, what can I offer that is of equal value to the money that they're going to give to us? Maybe it's recognition. There's all kinds of stuff. We'll talk about that, but we want to see what can we give so that it is a fair and equal exchange, not like, I'm going to hope that they give us this money and then I'll feel super indebted to them forever. It's like, nope, if we've done it right, everybody feels good about everything that's been exchanged, the money, the growth, all of it. Next slide, please. All right. Some of the features of successful relationship-based fundraising. First is meaningful conversations and listening, not going through and immediately pitching your project. And this is not necessarily a bad thing to do. If you're going to sit down with a donor, you want to explain why you're trying to do what you do. The best fundraisers spend at least half of the time sitting with donors, listening and asking questions as they do talking about their project, their mission, their future, their vision, all of that. If you can get it to be about a 50-50 talk, you know that you're headed in the right direction. Listening obviously is a trainable skill set. Some people are naturally very good interpersonally. They're very good one-on-one. So, oh, I'm just not a people person. It's like, maybe not, but the art of sitting down and being an active listener, being a genuine listener and connecting as a human, that is also a trainable skill set. So whether you feel comfortable with that or you have a natural skill for it or you don't, it is something that you can practice. It's something that you can learn. And it's useful, obviously, in all areas of life, not just in fundraising, but we really, really want to make sure that we're practicing this as part of the thing. We don't know what kind of projects or sub niches within our mission are most exciting for donors, or the gift that they gave that they felt had the biggest impact, if we don't ask. And if they have not interacted with our organization at all yet, we can ask really easy questions like, hey, I saw in the paper, I saw online, or I saw whatever, that you gave that $10,000 gift to the deaf school. What prompted you to do that? That was a really generous gift. Like, what was exciting about that at the time? And just let them talk about it. You're going to learn so much just from hearing about why they give or what they might want to give. Another great question you can ask is, Hey, I know that y'all, responded to our annual appeal last year. Really appreciate your $500 contribution. What did you hope happened with that $500 that you gave us? I know you gave us the 500 and you responded in kind. We didn't even ask you really, just sent you a piece of mail. But what made you do that, and what did you hope happened on the other side of that 500? And then they'll tell you. And that's exactly the things that are important to them. And then you can use that to steer the conversation towards something that would be meaningful for them. So yes, it's about getting the donor's best gift. Always, that's our job. That's what we get paid to do, or that's what we're called to do, is we want to maximize revenue so we can maximize our impact. But the best way to get the donor's best gift is not to try to trick them into it with some kind of sales psychology. It's to find the thing that they are collaboratively passionate about and just give them an opportunity for that. And that's why we see the donors as collaborators. We want to, they're a part of this. There's a part of this is our board is, our volunteers, our leadership, our staff, all these people have a part to play. And if they don't feel like they're part of the team and and part of the mission, they're not going to stick around long term. So one example of this is just to try to personalize your engagement. So you're not necessarily always sending the same thank you to everyone, or you're not sending the same ask to everyone. It might be the same project. It might be the case that you're fundraising for the same building or the same program expansion, but the way that you talk about it or the way that you talk about the outcomes is going to be different. And you're only going to know those things and how it should be different if you've asked lots of questions and you've fostered that two-way connection with the donor ahead of time. You can start this right away. You don't have to be like, well, we don't have any people who I know that well yet. It's like, that's great. That gives you so much opportunity to start. Like, you can start with any of your donors now, and you can sit down with them and ask them for nothing. Just say, hey, I want to check in with you. We don't have anything that we're going to ask you for right now. I'd just love to take you to coffee and tell you a little bit about our vision for the year, and love to hear about what you're excited about in terms of our work right now. And you can sit down for 30, 40 minutes and get a ton of information about what is meaningful and resonates with that donor, so that when the time comes that you are going to ask for something, you have a whole playbook on, like, here are the things that are exciting to them, and here are the things that I can show up with that are meaningful. And that just kind of creates that relationship even further. Next slide, please. Okay, why is this important? Why not just go with the churn and burn, which feels like probably a lot less work? Because it is true. It's like, well, this is all good stuff, and I believe that it might be effective, but it's going to be a lot more time and energy. Giving USA, a good source of fundraising data that we kind of reflect back to a lot. Individuals are the critical pillar of philanthropic activity, meaning in terms of the overall pie chart of the people who give away money, or the entities that give away money, individuals make up a huge majority. And there's also another big chunk that's foundations. And foundations, a lot of the time, are just people. And they're just giving through their foundations. They maybe have a couple of people but it's like the family foundation, or like they'll set up a company foundation. Foundations are still people. It's still the same thing. So we're getting a disproportionately large amount of money from people. We get a lot of time, especially when we're starting with new clients. They say, well, we got to go to all the corporations in town. They're the ones with the money. They have so much money. They also have a very strong fiscal responsibility to keep as much money of that possible and return it to their shareholders. Not a bad thing. They're not unethical. It's just that's the way of business. But if you have a very wealthy person versus a very wealthy business, that person is likely way more liquid and a lot easier to convince and create a relationship with, because they're a human, than a corporation is. So individuals being the absolute critical piece. 87% report giving because it brings personal fulfillment. Again, people don't give away because they have tax advantages, like maybe, yes, some sort of, or you might have a little bit. But for the most part, people are going to give because it brings some sort of human connection, some sort of personal fulfillment to them. No one is ever going to make money by giving it away. It's like, well, I'm going to give money because of my taxes. If you give away no money, you would end up with more money in the end. It's just, I want to direct some of that money, or a bigger percentage, away from the government. I can take a little bit of a hit so I can leave money in my community or whatever. So just keeping in mind that, and that many non-givers cite the lack of personal connection as the reason they don't give. We always say the number one reason people don't give is because they're not asked. It's like, if you don't sit down and ask a donor for a gift, they're like, I probably would have given something, or I would have given more, but they didn't seem like they needed it. Like, if they would have needed the $10,000, they would have asked me for it. Like, I'm not just going to unprompted give them that. They seem like they're doing fine. But if you sit down and say, hey, it's not just that we need the $10,000. I know that you expressed before that these are some of the areas that are exciting to you. we actually have a new program in that area, and we're able to do this, this, and this, and it costs about $10,000. We'd love for you to basically endorse that for the next, 18 months or whatever. It pays for all this. It's $10,000. Is that something you'd consider? And it's so custom, it's so specific to them. Again, you're just kind of offering opportunities, saying like, whether you give or not, we're going to stay friends. But you told me before that you were excited about these things. And I know that because we have this personal connection. We've connected as a human, this relationship-based fundraising. And here's some things that are specific to you, not necessarily just specific to the organization. All right. Next slide, please. I think this one might be Jenna. Jenna, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it from here.
Thank you so much. Jake has done a great job of covering the why and some of the data that supports why this is the right direction for our organizations to be heading. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the logistical how. How do we incorporate relationship-based activities? First and foremost, do a quick back to year inventory of the tools that you have in your shop. If you don't have a fancy CRM, that's okay. You don't need one. Let's build some basic systems that are going to work for you and your team members, whether they are volunteer or paid staff, leadership or board, that are going to help you really, really focus on your donors' interests. Of course, you can use your CRM. Are you using it to the fullest of its potential? Probably not. None of us do. If you don't have a CRM, do you have a basic detailed spreadsheet that is shareable with everybody that is working on your fundraising? Do you have an Outlook calendar? Put reminders in your calendar every Friday. Block out some time to do stewardship calls and give yourself a new list every Friday. Who are the top 3 prospects that I need to touch in with? Who are the top 3 donors from this week that I need to call and say thank you to? Obviously, they're going to get their tax acknowledgement. They're going to get their auto receipt from your online giving. But how am I going to stand out in their mind as an organization in town that went the extra step, right? That's what we like to do with our clients at the beginning of the year. A lot of the teams that I'm working with right now, we are doing a deep dive. We're assessing last year's operations and successes, and we're figuring out how we take that extra step in 2026. So go beyond demographics, right? Yes, we're going to do a deep dive in our 25 giving, and we're going to look at the folks that are right on the border of that next giving level, or the folks that have been giving the same amount or range for a series of years. And we're going to identify them as a segment where we want to do some intentional cultivation, right? They're on the cusp. Now is the time for us to move them into that deeper funding partnership, as Jake said. It is a partnership, but that means that we have to go a little bit deeper. In discovery, we often talk about asking a donor what is their why, right? Why did you give your first gift to this organization? What motivated that first contribution? Let's go further with that. What was meaningful about your biggest gift to our organization? What made it so special to you? Those answers are going to surprise you. Some people are going to say, well, our family wanted to build a legacy. And this was our first opportunity to do a naming that's going to be permanent, or that's going to build a name and reputation for our business or our family, and that was important to us. Some people are going to say, we had a personal connection to the cancer care we received at this hospital, or this program was really important in changing our child's outcomes. Those are meaningful conversations, and you want to capture those notes in your CRM or your Excel database, because you want to come back and revisit that as you shape a really important, meaningful proposal for that donor. Again, we want to have handwritten notes, right? You guys, the art of a mailed letter is so, so lost these days. I know that postage has gone up, it is astronomically priced. But if you can carve out a little bit of time and a little bit of a postage budget and do some meaningful handwritten cards throughout the year, and not just as a thank you for your gift, right? thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed coffee with you, Michaela. It was such a great conversation. I can't wait to do that again. A meaningful handwritten note, a special text message with a photo of one of their program points, right? Um, Progress on the building project that they're helping to fund. Those are things that are easy for us to do, and yet they are so meaningful to our donors. And when we work for larger, multi tiered organizations, those are the things that often get lost. And so, if we can prioritize those stewardship and cultivation moments as part of our work in 2026, we and the organizations that we work for are really going to stand out and help take our donors to a more intentional and meaningful level. Make a phone call just because, right? But it's not just about, I remembered your birthday and wanted to call and say thank you. It's sending them their favorite candy bar because you know that that's the only chocolate that they eat, right? Make a note of that in your CRM. Spoiler alert, we do this for our Pride clients all the time. We find out their favorite snack and then we sneak it in their goodie bag the next time they show up for Academy. It is a wonderful little surprise and a little nugget that just lets them know we remember you, right? We saw you, and we know that those salted peanuts are your favorite thing in the world, and we're going to make sure that you're happy today. That's the sort of thing that just helps you and your organization stand out. A reminder, Jake touched on this. It is a gray area and it is a fine line that we have to thread. We are building relationships with the organizations that we serve, not our own friend list, right? We do want to be genuine. We do want to be authentic. But at the end of the day, if I leave this organization, I leave you, donor friend, in great hands at that organization because I have introduced you to so many meaningful touch points at that organization. Let's go on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about donor centered stewardship. Again, it's not just about the cultivation and the deepening of the relationship toward that really meaningful gift. It's about the ways that I'm going to follow up and thank you for the transformational funding partnership that you've brought to us. Sharing tailored impact stories is an amazing way. Again, all of us are walking around with like top quality photography equipment in our back pocket. We've got text and email and all sorts of apps. Um, Catch a little video and send that via text or email to one of your donors. It doesn't have to be high quality. If you've seen TikTok or YouTube today, you know that the content we consume is much more approachable and natural and very personable. Your donors are comfortable with that. Surprise and delight them with the memory of what is important to them or what they're passionate about. Bring them into your program. We do this a lot in the silent phase of a campaign, right? I am sharing insider information with you as a lead donor prospect because I want you to invest on the ground floor, right? I want your feedback. I want your input. Maybe we had you interview our in our feasibility study. And the first thing that I'm going to do to cultivate that relationship is share with you the findings from that study. I'm going to tell you the cumulative feedback and the recommendations we received. And then once you have invested and joined this project, I'm going to give you updates. I'm going to invite you to help us in an advisory role. I might ask you to join a committee and help open new doors and networks because you are such a passionate advocate for what we're doing. I want to frame all of our conversations again around those shared values that we have, the things that I know you're passionate about as a donor or a lead supporter of this project. And I want to be constantly giving you updates about the outcomes of your gift, right? I do not have to wait for our glossy, full production annual report to tell you about the impact of your giving. I can do that quarterly. I can do that in an easy, quick text message. And then guess what? I can repackage that content into my monthly newsletter and send it to my full email list as well. We don't always have to be recreating and rebranding. The goal here is to really demonstrate how Jake's gift to my organization has advanced our mission, right? And I want to always tie that back to the thing that Jake was so passionate about in the first place that motivated him to give the gift. So, yes, we've used your funding across all of our organization and we've covered operational expenses. But let's talk about the meaningful impact that gets him excited. One little tip that I often recommend when you have a donor prospect or committed, taking a tour of your facility, right? Or observing one of your programs, make note of the things that they get really interested in, right? Where do they stop and ask questions? What is the topic that they sort of light up about? Those are the things that they are saying they care about without directly saying they care about, right? Those are the things that they want to hear more about over and over. And those are always going to be the things that drive it home for them. Let's go to the next slide, Trish. So I want to talk a little bit about examples I've experienced as a fundraiser, and of course as a consultant to our Pride clients. But I also want to hear from you. So let me dive in, and then anyone that's willing, if you'll raise your hand or type in the chat, I'd love to hear some stories about your meaningful relationship-based fundraising activities. So real quick, I want to brag on Jim for a second. Again, he's just doing a bang up job. And Jim is very new to major gift fundraising work. But he came to me recently in one of our weekly meetings and he said, Jenna, I have met this couple. They definitely have a deep personal connection. They've lost someone recently to an accidental overdose. I understand where they are in their grief process. I know that they are future prospects, right? I know they have capacity. So he's using the language. But he said, right now, all I want to do is support them and the grief space that they are in. And I said, Jim, you're doing the right thing. Right now, you're doing the right thing. He had coffee and he had conversation and he just provided a shoulder, right? That was genuine and that was meaningful. We have gone on to share some additional grief resources in the Fresno area with this family. That's genuine. These are amazing resources that the Hortons have helped to establish in Fresno. They are providing support and emotional outlets, and that's all we're doing right now. We know that there's capacity and that there's inclination, but right now we're just being support system. And we will find the time to move that conversation forward. But first, we're just being there for these individuals in a time that is difficult for them. That's a very particular instance. I previously worked with some great donors that were very, very interested in hosting events and uh, being important, right? That was just sort of a thing that made them very happy. At the time I was working in higher ed, they wanted to make a meaningful impact to our university and felt that hosting events that could help increase enrollment would be a meaningful contribution to the university, which was accurate. Their initial instinct, as a well to do couple in South Louisiana, was to host student events. So they tried this with the admissions team on and off for years. The reality is, this was a couple in their late 60s, early 70s. They were incredibly hospitable. They lived in a beautiful home in a great community, but their house wasn't comfortable. for 17-year-old high school students, right? They had a very large, rare crystal collection. They didn't have kids in the home. It was kind of stuffy and kind of formal. And the attendance for these events really began to dwindle. And so they were feeling defeated. The admissions office was feeling kind of overstretched. This was their goal, but it was not the right fit. And I did not want to make an event for an event's sake. So my friends in the admissions department and I decided instead of targeting students with this particular couple, we would focus instead on high school guidance counselors. High school guidance counselors don't get a whole lot of love. Let me just say that, right? Like they don't get Teacher Appreciation Day, they don't get a whole lot of Christmas gifts, and they have a really, really tough job. What is so exciting to a high school guidance counselor is being invited to a special luncheon at a nice restaurant in South Louisiana. And so that's what we did. We brought our university president, we brought our provost, we brought really important people from the university along with the admissions counselors. And we pulled together a room full of our target high school guidance counselors. Our donors were ecstatic because they were the stars in the room. They were making a meaningful impact. And within 3 months, we had doubled the application numbers from that particular region of South Louisiana. It was a win win. I immediately went back and we more than tripled the donor amount, the gift amount from that couple. I found what was important to them. I found a way to tie it to the goals of my organization without making more work or expense for us. By the way, the couple fully paid for the lunches and they committed to do it for as many years as we asked them to. It was an open ended agreement. They also turned that into a named scholarship. Anybody ready to share some examples of meaningful cultivation or stewardship that you have done in your work? Anybody? Do I see any hands? I think Michaela might also have one example.
Happy to share. I'm going to talk about a client that I have the honor of working with. They do not have hospice at their healthcare system. This is just not a part of what they do. However, the development director was meeting with a brand new donor, kind of at a lower level, certainly considering their capacity, met with them just to start building that relationship, right? Part of the stewardship process. And she is such an expert at, like Jake said, 50% of the time you're listening, 50% of the time they're talking. She might be more like an 80% of the time listening, 20% of the time talking. And she learned what inspires this individual that gave, why they care about healthcare. And they told an incredibly meaningful story about their mother's experience in hospice. And what this fundraiser did was they left that meeting, really thought about it, and was like, okay, I need to build a mutually beneficial partnership. We don't have hospice. That's not the right fit. But what do we do that meets, the need of the patient and accomplishes what was so significant and meaningful to the donor? Together, the donor and the organization came together and built a palliative care program. It was already on the health system's to-do list or dream list. They had thought through what this would look like. They had a preliminary budget. She went to this donor and said, we're looking for a partner to get this up and running. I heard you. I think this might be of interest. And they were honored. They got to name this program after his mother. It was truly the best scenario of listening, thanking a donor in a meaningful way, hearing what drives them, and building that relationship, that partnership between the organization and that donor. So it really spoke to me. He's happy. The organization's happy. The patients are being cared for at an elevated level. Like Jenna said, it was a win-win. I think it's a win-win-win because you bring in the patients into that one too. But we'd love to hear more of your examples. We'll also have a little time at the end that you can share. I'd love to move on to, we've talked about what relationship-based fundraising is and how to actually conduct these activities, but how do we measure these activities? So next slide, please, Trish. So these measurement tips come from the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Contributed revenue matters. Okay, that's why we do this work, right? But relational fundraising needs to look at a broader set of indicators. It's about the energy that you put into that relationship, and the dollars raised will follow if you're putting intentional energy behind that relationship building. So at this first, if this is kind of new to you and you're thinking, well, how do I get started? How do I know I'm on the right track? We encourage you to take a look at these initial metrics. Meaningful connections, the first one AFP brings up. And Jen has done a beautiful job of talking through what those look like. Curated touch points that are designed specifically for the donor you're working with. And at your organization, is this every single donor in your sphere? Probably not. These are those donors that are going to give a transformational gift or a major gift or a mid-level gift, perhaps, whatever your capacity is to facilitate. These are those personalized calls that are talking about a program they care about. It's a personalized note. Like Jenna said, I love getting notes in the mail. Something that really highlights that you heard them, you know what they care about. Maybe it's a PDF of a newspaper article that speaks to something that you had talked about in a previous meeting. Send that to them via email, whatever really will make them feel heard, right? And then this holistic involvement. So this is from AFP, and I think we need to take a second to talk about what really this is. These are the interactions beyond a donation. So is this person or donor making connections for you? Are they helping you expand your donor network? Are they volunteering? Jake, I think you said somebody's 70% more likely to donate if they're a volunteer. Was that it?
Yep.
Okay. So are they a volunteer at your organization? Are they a board member? These are those elevated engagements that really bring them close and build that strong relationship. If you're feeling good with that, then we encourage you to take a look at these secondary metrics. This is where the analysis really comes in. This is how you're going to know if you're really moving the needle to create a stronger relationship with your donor. Donor retention. Taking a look, has this donor remained with us over the years? Donation retention. This is often omitted in an analysis, and I encourage you to add 2 lines in your data polls. Are the donations remaining consistent? We really want to know if they're going down, right? But we want to make sure that people are staying engaged with us year over year. And that brings us to this third bullet, upgrades. That's the goal. You know you are doing well as a fundraiser, or your staff is doing well if you're seeing upgrades, because it means you're customizing exactly what the donor is interested in. They understand their impact. They understand the problem you're working to solve as an organization, and you have properly asked them to join in that effort. Upgrades rarely happen. They sometimes do, but they rarely happen without you as the fundraiser asking for an increase in donation. But if you've built a strong, mutually beneficial relationship between the donor and your organization, those upgrades do come naturally. And then the last bullet here, I just want to highlight, because this is something that's come up certainly with me and talking to our clients, is lifetime giving. Sometimes we get a little bashful about lifetime giving. We're like, oh, this donor has contributed $100,000 over the last 10 years. That's kind of a lot. Can I really ask for more? Absolutely, yes. In fact, I encourage you to set a coffee with that donor, print off their lifetime giving, bring it to them, share and celebrate their impact alongside them. Did you know over the last decade you've contributed $100,000 to this organization? Your impact has been consistent and significant. What can we do to bring it to the next level? Of those gifts, what spoke to you the most? What were you most proud of? I encourage you to use lifetime giving as a way to build a strong connection with that donor year over year. So here are just some starting metrics you can look at. Let's move to the next slide, please. There are some pitfalls, as you might imagine. Relationship-based fundraising requires some intentionality. It takes thought and consideration to do well. One of these first bullets, you all as fundraisers have likely experienced this, inheriting a relationship at your organization that requires a little bit of healing, so to speak. Perhaps the donor was asked for a gift too early. Perhaps they were asked for the wrong thing. And then, heaven forbid, they were asked for a contribution. They felt great about it. And then there was not a fabulous stewardship plan. So they just felt like they didn't make a difference, or they felt ignored or unappreciated. Remember, your donors aren't just check writers, they're your collaborators. Um, this next one, treating metrics as activity counts. This happens kind of easily, especially when we try and see our progress. We'll put together our little check boxes. Connecting with a donor is always valuable, but really measuring which connections are moving the relationship forward. And you're thinking about your donor cycle. What connection or interaction is moving that relationship deeper towards a solicitation, towards higher levels of cultivation, whatever it might be that your aim is with the donor, but measure those activities that are deepening engagement between the donor and the organization. It's always nice to say hello when you see each other at the grocery store. In fact, please do that. We're all human. It's nice to say hello to each other, but that's not necessarily what's going to move someone to a transformative gift. This next piece, ignoring leadership's role. In some cases, you might be the leadership at your organization, but in other cases, you might be the VP of advancement or the director of development, and you work alongside your executive director or president and CEO. You are working so hard to build these meaningful relationships. You know all the details about this person and what drives them, or this family and what drives them. But if you're not doing your duty to help set your president and CEO up for success and saying, hey, they actually just increased their giving, or they gave the largest gift they've ever given before. I know you're going to go to this leadership council meeting. I just wanted to put it on your radar that we're in conversations about a transformative gift with this corporation, and their CEO is going to be there. You need to set your leadership up for success in supporting you and building these relationships with your donors. And then the last piece, under investing in stewardship. I'm going to tell two quick little stories to help outline how important this is in this work. One of the clients that I worked with, and it hits bullet point 1 and 4 here. They inherited a relationship where a donor gave $1 million. And that was the largest gift they'd ever given. They were so excited about it. And just the infrastructure for the organization at the time, there was a transition and there wasn't a development staff member to help steward that gift appropriately. There wasn't significant thank you or engagement in the impacts of how those donations were being stewarded at the organization. Well, the donor felt really bad about this and actually didn't complete that pledge. That doesn't happen very often, but that required the organization or the development staff member that stepped in to really heal that relationship, explain what's changing moving forward, thank them. Now they're in a position where they can ask for another contribution, and they will incorporate stewardship and meaningful engagement as a part of their plan. Under investing in stewardship and early campaign donations is something that I see and encourage clients to not engage in. They might say, well, Michaela, we don't have a long enough donor list for our signature gifts donors or $50,000 plus donors. I'm like, hold on, that's fine. You still need to steward them, keep them engaged. In fact, they're the first ones that raise their hand to support this campaign. You really need to keep them engaged. Tell them how you're building the donor base. Ask for their help in building the donor base so that they can feel like their contributions not only going towards this project, but they're going to help build a community that also cares about this. Again, building those mutually beneficial partnerships. You need the organization plus the donor to meet the need or to create the impact, right? So as we're nearing the end of our session today, I want to just kind of wrap up all the pieces here. Jake talked about what relationship-based fundraising is. It's strategic and donor-centered. It looks at the long-term health of the organization and the long-term impact of the donor. Jenna touched on it very well in her portion. When you leave the organization, consider what your role was in the history of that organization. You want those donors to remain just as connected and passionate about the organization if you are not there than if you were, right? And remembering that relationship-based fundraising is centered on finding partnership or those mutually beneficial relationships where the organization and the donor are critical to come together to meet a need or solve a problem. That's just what nonprofit work is, right? It's all a collaborative experience, and the organization has the vision and the know-how to execute and solve a problem, and the donor has the passion and the care to help make that happen. So your role as the fundraiser is to marry those two, find that compromise in the middle. All right. Well, we've covered a whole lot today. If there's anybody that has some examples that they want to share, please do unmute, tell us your story. Any questions about what you heard today? All right. Well, as you're pondering this or thinking it through or thinking through other things that you want to solve at your organization, we encourage you to scan this QR code, send us an email. One of our team members would love to talk to you about how to customize for you or answer some of your personal questions. And it's great to kick off the new year with you all in our first virtual forum of 2026. But we